Hi everyone, welcome everyone to Grid Alternatives' first Women in Solar webinar. Today we are shining light on the careers of 4 amazing female role models in solar construction, design, and operations. This is the first webinar in the series as part of a national Women in Solar initiative in partnership with SunEdison. As folks know, solar is a growing industry with jobs growing at a rate of 20% last year. However, women are still underrepresented in the solar workforce. So we are doing our part here today to bring more women into the solar industry and promote their professional growth. Before we introduce our amazing panelists, I just want to give you a little background on Grid Alternatives and myself. Grid is a nonprofit solar contractor. We install solar electric systems exclusively for low-income families. To date, we've installed almost 13 megawatts for over 4,000 families. And we do that by leading teams of volunteers and job trainees to do the work, providing them valuable hands-on experience. I am Anna Bautista. I'm the Director of Construction for Grid, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. My background is in electrical engineering. I studied at MIT, and while I was there, I had the privilege of participating in a service learning project in Haiti, which is 97% deforested. And I saw firsthand how the state of the environment directly impacts quality of life and public health. So I thought getting into renewable energy was a way to fuse both my technical background and this passion for environment and environmental justice. So I picked up and moved across country to California, where I thought I had the best shot at getting an entry-level job in solar. And I told companies that pretty much I would wash trucks, I would do whatever I needed to do to get my foot in the door. And now I've been in the industry for about 9 years as a designer, an installer, site supervisor, project manager. And as Grid's Director of Construction, I currently lead our expansion projects into new states, into new communities, and I manage our policies around quality and safety. Currently, we operate in California, Colorado, New York, and we're launching into the Mid-Atlantic region later this year, which is pretty exciting. And so enough about me, a little bit of housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded, and it will be available at our webpage at gridalternatives.org, as well as our YouTube page. And then as well, to the right side of your screen, you should see a Q&A window. So if you have any questions for any specific panelist or all of the panelists, please put your questions in there, and we'll do our Q&A session towards the end of the hour. So let's go ahead and introduce our amazing panelists. We've got with us today Bernadette Jendrusch. She's the Operations Project Manager. She's managing utility scale projects for SunEdison. We also have Melissa McMorrow, an architect for SolarCity. She's doing residential and large commercial projects. We also have Cari Williamette. She's a master electrician and an electrical inspector. She's currently with EcoVision Electric. And then joining us in a little bit, we'll have Koralie Hill, who is the general superintendent who's running sites for Sunlight and Power. So I really want to get to having folks share their stories, and so we can pretty much just launch into it. So if we could go around to each panelist, tell folks about your current job, what does a typical day on the job look like, how do you spend a majority of your time, and highlight a favorite project for us that you've worked on. And so let's start with Bernadette. If you could tell folks a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure. Thanks, Anna. Happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm looking forward to this discussion and hearing from all the other women on the panel. I am currently a project manager, operations project manager for SunEdison. I work on large utility scale projects. So far I've worked on 6 utility scale projects ranging between 10 and 20 megawatts each. I have also spent about 10 months working in India on rural electrification projects for SunEdison's Eradication of Darkness program, which is a very rewarding opportunity for me. My typical day is not really a typical day. As a project manager, if you've ever held that role, you know that you're constantly juggling one thing, activity and one responsibility to the next. But here's an example of some of the things that I do on, a regular normal utility scale project. So on a weekly basis, for instance, I'll have meetings with the utility transmission operator. We'll go over RFIs for our PV substation. In the most recent case, we built a high voltage switching station for the utility, and we transferred that over to them. So we dealt with RFIs on that on a weekly basis. And then the same day I'd be meeting with our planning and logistics guys to make sure that the equipment was being delivered on to the project site when it needed to be, and that was after placing purchase orders, weeks and months before, earlier for major equipment such as transformers, inverters, tracking systems, modules, and so forth. I work with EPC contractors, making sure the project's on schedule, helping to address any RFIs that they might have. I spent numerous calls on with Spain and Germany with tracker manufacturers there. We were using some new equipment that hadn't been used in the U.S. before, so we wanted to make sure that it was modified to meet U.S. code and a state code. I deal with budgeting and schedule management. I deal with making sure that deliverables are submitted to the regulatory entities such as CAISO, California Independent Systems Operating Agency, to make sure that we can bring our plant online and reach commercial operation. I work with the PPA off-taker, making sure that we deliver all of the requirements that they have for the PPA. I manage relationships with investors, potential buyers, consultants, engineers, developers, the gamut. So there is no typical day. It's kind of managing from one issue to the next. I think the majority of the time that I spend on my work is answering questions, resolving problems, putting out fires, and mostly avoiding fires. I think that one of the assets that women have is our ability to see potential problems and come up with ways to avoid those problems before they materialize. Someone once described women as being good fire preventers, and I know that firefighters tend to get all the glory and the recognition, but in my job I want to prevent the fires, and in the first place it's less stressful. Let's see, last question was favorite project. So the favorite project that I've worked on, and certainly wasn't the easiest project, was electrifying a rural village in India. There's a little village called Mithankeda that had 19 families that had never seen power before, and working in India is extremely challenging. Logistics is like nothing I've ever seen before. Trying to move equipment from one side of the country to the other, to a small rural village, down dirt roads in monsoon season is complicated to say the least. But when we finally wired up all of those homes and we put in those street lights and we flipped that switch, and I stood at the edge in a field looking back at the village and seeing the homes glow for the first time, it was one of the most rewarding things I've ever done in my life.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you. I really like how you phrase that, being fire preventers versus firefighters. I like that. Let's see here. Cari, do you want to share your story with folks?
Sure. Yeah. I started out about 30 years ago as an electrician. In the state of Minnesota. I am a licensed electrician in Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, and California. Ended up about 15 years ago as an electrical inspector for Minneapolis and then eventually St. Paul. And one of the first solar PV jobs that I inspected was very frustrating because the homeowner had totally covered the roof with solar panels, north, south, east, and west. What little bit was on the south side that might have actually produced was under a big oak tree. And I asked the homeowner, I said afterwards, I said, you realize this probably is never going to produce? And he said, yes, but I'm green. And it was so frustrating because it's stuff like that that really ends up giving the PV world a bad name. And so started doing a lot of research, a lot of education. I've been teaching classes for about 25 years in electrical in general. Ended up teaching classes for inspectors as to what to look for in solar PV. So when I got out of inspecting about 3 years ago, ended up working for an engineering firm that did design work for both solar and wind. And I was acting as their out-in-the-field private inspector, verifying everything was done to both code and spec. There's a lot of states that don't have licensing requirements, a lot of states that don't have their own inspectors. And so I was supposed to go out there, basically serve as the eyes and ears for the developer, verify that everything was being built properly. So ran into a few issues because they wanted me to be a third party, had a problem being a third party when I was employed by the engineering firm who designed the systems. So went out about a year and a half ago with another gal with EcoVision Electric. We now do everything from small residential installs all the way on up to testing and commissioning, third-party verification for large utility-scale fields. So my day, there is no typical day. Currently, right now today, I am sitting at Dunwoody Technical College in Minneapolis. I'm teaching a class. We just got back from Georgia, where we were doing final testing and commissioning, thermal scans, IV curve tests for a small 1 megawatt system out in the boondocks in Georgia. Last winter, we got to do a 6 kW installation on a house up in northern Wisconsin. 12-12 pitch, standing seam metal roof in December in Wisconsin. Definitely learned a lot about rope climbing. So there really is no typical day. We've worked on anything from, like I said, the small couple of kW systems. We're currently working with one of the local high schools, designing a small system for on their roof for educational purposes, all the way on up to 20, 30 megawatt systems out in California. Primarily going out, doing IV curves, thermal scans. We can detect micro cracks in brand new modules, letting the developer know that there's issues that he's going to have to deal with in the future. IV curves, verifying. It's amazing how often electricians can't count. Getting that 10, 11, 12, 13 modules per string sometimes is a little difficult. So we verify that all that's been taken care of. So that's kind of my world in a nutshell. My favorite project, we worked on some projects down in North Carolina, Appalachian Mountains. Again, I was just serving as the owner's, developer's eyes and ears, private inspector. And these are 200 kW systems because that was the cap in North Carolina at the time. And these are out in the mountains, absolutely gorgeous scenery, very, very rural, very, very poor communities. And they were the developer would put 200 kW on the farmers, one of the farmers' fields. And the developer, of course, got all the tax incentives, but the farmer got all of the income. And they've got a feed-in tariff in North Carolina that's pretty good. So we have farmers who have not had a real job in generations. These guys don't know what a real paycheck is. And at the end of the month, these guys are now getting checks for several $1,000s, really helping out the way of life down there. And it was so cool to see how thrilled these people were, who really didn't think solar was going to work, and then all of a sudden they're getting the benefits from it. Not to mention the absolutely gorgeous scenery and watching them run livestock, because a lot of these systems were put in fields that were good for livestock, not good for crops. And then they took and put the livestock back in there afterwards. Sheep, mules. Sheep and mules are okay. Goats are not. Horses are not. Horses have a tendency to lean into the modules and break them. So it's a real learning experience seeing what the farmers could do around the systems. It's been great fun going back there because I have to go back every year to just verify that everything is still properly operating.
Wow, that's great. Thanks for taking your time out today while you're teaching class today. I'm sure a lot of people are excited to hear about your story. Melissa from SolarCity, would you like to tell folks about what you do?
Yes, sure. Thank you for having me. This is a great experience so far, hearing everyone's story. I have been working with SolarCity for about 6 years. I started at a couple architecture firms. I studied architecture in college, and I was really frustrated by. I'd always wanted to get into the sustainable side of architecture, and I was frustrated at how it was very difficult to get a client, to make that affordable for our client. And so when I saw that SolarCity was working towards making it affordable to the masses, I jumped in, and And since then, I've held a lot of positions here. Started in residential, kind of managing a design team to just quicken the pace of designs across the board. And then after that, I started to manage larger projects, about 200 to 600 kilowatts. I did a couple of on-site project management things, and then was helping to manage an entire account, which we had a lot of systems, probably a total of 70 megawatts total. And and from there, I'm now working as an architect for SolarCity. It's kind of a niche field in that architects are required to work on school construction. So I do a lot of construction at canopy-mounted PV systems at schools. And in terms of what my day looks like, now it's a lot of reviewing of plans, making sure things comply with the building code, responding to RFIs, and just everything across the board. I'm making sure that the construction of a system actually complies with the plans that were drawn. So in terms of I found it really interesting to hear some of the earlier panelists, because a lot of what I do at one point was almost exactly what they do. Now I kind of find myself on the other end because I'm responding to a lot of field questions and just trying to make sure that the construction crews, have a clear direction of what they're supposed to build and how it's supposed to be done. I think that women play a really great role. Can play a really great role in that, because I do agree that I think the planning aspect comes really. It comes easy to me. I think it comes easy to a lot of women, and I really hope that more women start to get involved. In terms of my favorite project, I did manage a project at a Walmart where we put a system on a roof, and I think to date it is still the quickest mobilization to permission to operate that the company has seen. So I'm really proud about that, because that it requires a lot of planning and really being on the ball for everything that you're doing, and for me, it's like a real benchmark of success.
Yeah, congratulations on that quick PTO. It's a good story. Koralie, are you like to introduce folks to Koralie Hill with Sunlight and Power? If you want to tell folks about your job as General Superintendent. Hey, Koralie, can you hear us? Oh, no. All right, we'll keep working to get Koralie's volume up. No. We might have to come back to her. We'll keep working on Koralie. So the next section I wanted to go into, we've got a lot of folks who are viewing us who might be considering solar as a career or just starting their careers in solar. So if folks could give a little bit of background on why they chose the solar field and how they got their start in the industry, whether they had some guidance or inspired by anyone, and if they had any advice for people who wanted a similar career as theirs. Maybe let's go back to Bernadette.
Okay, how I got my start, my computer is all freezing up, so right now I hope you're seeing me, because
I see you.
all right, okay, good. My background let me back up. I started in solar from a field in real estate development, actually doing brownfields development. I have a master's in public affairs with an emphasis in urban issues and environmental issues, and I've always been interested in environmental causes, I guess I could say. And I found myself working doing redevelopment of brownfield sites, which are contaminated properties. And then a few years back, when the economy kind of went belly up for real estate development, I decided to kind of take the advice that I'd been giving to my own friends who were trying to figure out what they wanted to do with their careers. I kept saying, go into solar. And I found myself kind of at a crossroads. It's like, okay, nothing's happening in real estate development right now. What am I going to do? So I decided to take some courses in renewable energy and to see if I could take my project management skills and combine them with the training that I had in renewable energy to to position myself for in the solar field. I was fortunate enough to get in contact with SunEdison. SunEdison at the time, this was about maybe coming up on 4 years ago, they were establishing their utility division. SunEdison had a very successful run with doing distributed generation rooftop type of projects. And they had won several RFPs from utilities for large-scale projects, and they needed to develop a team to build them. So I was one of two people that were hired to start the utility division and start building these projects. When we started, we had a pretty lean team. There was, I think we hired a land development person a couple of months after I started. He had his hands full working on other projects that we had, and he couldn't manage mine. So he asked me, with my experience in land development, if I could handle that aspect of my projects, my 2 projects in New Mexico at the time. And I said, sure. So I ended up doing kind of both land development and project management on both of those projects. Over the years, we have grown as a company. We have a whole division that deals with permitting, getting our conditional use permit, and doing the development work. And we come in and take it from there and build the projects. So that's kind of my how I got into solar, and I'm very fortunate and happy to be in the position that I am right now.
And do you have any advice for someone who wants a similar position as yourself?
Yeah, the advice I would say is really target to your strengths. I am not an electrician. I'm not an electrical engineer. So I came at it from being a good project manager. And I find that, if you target to those skills and you're not afraid to admit that you don't know something, you learn a heck of a lot. When you ask people to explain high voltage to you, I don't need to understand that. My engineers need to understand it. But if I open myself up to asking those questions, people love to tell people what they do. And it's a wonderful opportunity to broaden your knowledge base enough to, to increase your position and provide you the opportunity to grow. So it really is find your strengths and target toward that. If somebody like me can be building, 20 megawatt projects, solar projects, without a background in electrical engineering, it's manageable for anyone, I think.
Great, thank you. Cari, do you want to share how you got started and your advice for folks wanting to be electricians or inspectors?
All right. Yeah, I already said a little bit about my first inspecting project, but found out that there really was a real lack of knowledge throughout the inspecting world on solar. Nobody really knew it. So kind of took it upon myself, kind of got forced into taking it up to figure out the code issues and how to properly install systems in that from an NEC code angle. So I kind of got into it by default, just there was nobody else out there who was willing to do that. But found the research fascinating, and just being able to transfer that knowledge where it needs to be. I've given miniature classes all the way on up to full-fledged classes all across the United States for various inspectors and electricians who are interested. We do everything from solar install classes on. And so that's really how I got involved. Advice to other women. Going back to when I was first an apprentice electrician, you're one of the only women out there, and the entire construction field has been designed for guys. Their body shapes, the way they do stuff, men have much better upper body strength, women have much better lower body strength, and when you go out in the field and try to do stuff the way the guys do it, you know, that's all that's out there, you try to copy the way they run the hammer drill or things like that, it doesn't work. Being a woman in construction, you really have to find your own way of doing things, unless you can get lucky enough and find other women in the trade, and there just aren't that many. There have not been a whole lot of really good women role models in electrical construction. I found a few in Minnesota, and you find the few and you try to hang on to them. But you really have to be willing to experiment in how to do things that work for you. Like I said, all the way from how you handle the tools, how you handle rope lines when you're working up on a roof. All of that stuff is totally different. So it's basically just being willing, having the courage to, well, yeah, you got to deal with the guys. You have to be very willing to take the basic jobs to start with, but you also have to be willing to look at how you can make it work for you rather than just copying how everybody else is doing it.
Mm-hmm. And I have a specific question for you, Cari. It says here, since the repeal of affirmative action, have you seen any change in the amount of women electricians?
Yes, but it's actually been an improvement. When affirmative action first went into effect, we were getting a lot of women who the only reason they were in the trades were because of affirmative action. They didn't really like the work, and so we had it's actually, you know, like I said, it's improved because we now have a lot of women who really want to be there. They like the work, they enjoy what they're doing, versus the ones who are only there because the company has to meet their quota. So I think it's actually been an improvement.
Great, good to hear. Melissa, you already spoke a little bit about how you got your start in the industry. Do you have anything to add there, whether you had guidance or inspiration? And what advice you have for folks starting out in solar design?
Yeah, you know, I think when I first came here to SolarCity, my boss at the time was very inspiring, and he just would give everybody responsibility to kind of run with things, and I think that that was a very powerful management tool, and it's something that I know that I've tried to use with anybody that I manage now. And I think that, you know, it kind of helped me really create a basis in solar power. I mean, I came because I thought, oh, you know, this might be a way to make things affordable to a lot of people, but like I did, you know, at the time I didn't really know like what that meant for solar power in the long run. So I guess in terms of advice that I would give to people wanting to start out is that the industry is still new and growing. It's been, I mean, I guess it's, you know, at this point it's been around for a good number of years, but there is a lot of change in it still. You know, there's always changing incentives, and there's changing, you know, laws, and there's changes in utilities, etc. So it creates a lot of openings for people to really get involved with a bunch of different skill sets. You know, we're talking about just, you know, the engineering, design, construction side of things, but there's all sorts of opportunities in different avenues that are available to people now. And so I just encourage like women to really, you know, put your foot in the door in an area that you have expertise, because someone above you might not have realized that you can make an impact there. And so I think that's something that's really unique about the industry now, is that, you know, it has that kind of startup feel still, because there's not, you know, at this point there's like, you know, we're maybe halfway there to really creating a really ironclad industry that has, you know, all the rules set in stone, etc. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities for women in that regard. And I just want to echo, the panel in terms of the biggest challenges that, I've faced. On construction sites, I think I've faced the most because things are set up. I think, there's a general idea of how construction sites are run. There's like a guy in charge yelling at a bunch of other guys kind of thing. And I think that it's sometimes hard for people that are in charge to really imagine any kind of other setup. And so as a female, if you play to your strengths and set that example that, I can be a leader in a different sort of way, I think that is a powerful message, and I think people are hearing it. So I just encourage, women to get involved in construction, and it is, we are very outnumbered, but, I think that, in the long run, we'll start to see a lot more people entering the industry.
And I have maybe these are good questions for you, Melissa, but anyone else can feel free to chime in. We've got a couple of people who are studying architecture, wanting to get into solar design, and they're wondering what classes they should take, or if it's easy to get an internship doing solar design. Do you have any suggestions for people who are still in school?
Okay, so I can take that since I did study architecture in school. I think there are a lot of programs. I'm not sure what school they're at. I went to Carnegie Mellon University. They had a very sustainability intensive program there, where they were looking at sustainable materials and looking at how to use PV and solar thermal to create zero energy houses and things. So any classes in that vein I think are great. Another thing might be looking at ways to save in your electrical systems and your heating systems and things, because those are all, energy efficiency measures are very important to solar. You could put a lot less solar panels on there if you have an efficient water heating system. So I think that just really looking at, making sure that your classes are really looking at buildings in a holistic way is kind of a key to entering into the solar field.
Does anyone else have any advice for those who want to get into solar design? Speaking on the internship part of it, Grid Alternatives does have one-year internships or fellowships doing construction, possibly design. So if folks are interested, they can check out our website on gridalternatives.org/women to find out more about those positions. For folks who want to get some entry-level, intense mentorship for a year kind of position. Koralie, do we have you? Any word from Koralie? She looks good. All right. We touched about challenges of being a woman in solar already. Does anyone have anything to add on that? Bernadette, did you want a chance to talk about challenges of being a woman in solar and how you've overcome or worked through those challenges?
Well, our biggest challenge, I think, has already been voiced. There are too few of us. I think women are capable and can do as good a job as a guy can do, and oftentimes better in some types of work. But relative to the number of men, there are still too few of us, at least in my area of solar development. Now, but what I have seen I've been the sole project manager, woman project manager in utilities for SunEdison for the last, coming up on 4 years. But recently we had 2 women who have transitioned into assistant project managers. So there is hope. Things have changed quite a bit. We've come a long way in the last 15 years since I got first was first involved with the construction-related jobs. I mean, back then you had to fight harder, you know, to become recognized and be taken seriously. But what I found is that you just have to stand strong and hold your ground. And, you know, when you do that, the male-dominated workforce around you knew they couldn't push you around, and so they began to take you seriously, and you know, and you gained their respect. And you know, I'm seeing more and more women in construction-related fields, and now when I look back how it was, you know, 15 years ago, it's changed. I don't feel the same type of maybe disrespect, I guess, or not, you know, listening to my, you know, position and my authority. But if you state your position and that you are in control and you don't let that go, you gain that respect. And I found that, you know, there were time and time again, I've had, you know, male consultants that I worked with that said, you know, you've been the best project manager we've ever worked with, including men. And I think that that's part of it. We have to work harder at it, unfortunately, but when we do, I think we gain a greater respect.
I think there's another question here that might be perfect for you, Bernadette. Someone's asking, they've heard that project management positions are very stressful and that the positions can be replaceable. Is that a true feeling of project management positions?
Well, I can tell you they're very stressful. And my colleagues can attest to that. You know, are they replaceable? I don't know. Yeah, I guess anybody is replaceable. But the experience that I'll take an experienced person over an unexperienced person, period, you know, hands over heels. You know, stressful, yes, but, you know, I'm sure there are a lot of women out there that are mothers. I was unfortunately never, you know, had the opportunity to be a mother. But I've heard childbirth, descriptions of childbirth, and I kind of relate the feeling that childbirth must be to like giving birth to a project. I mean, it is excruciatingly painful, and it is so stressful and so frustrating at times. But then when it's done and you look back and the project is complete, you don't remember all the pain. You know, you really don't. You see the project and, man, we did that, you know, and my team did that. And, you know, so the stress you just have to learn to manage. I'm still learning how to manage it, and I haven't quite got there yet, but I think it's a lifelong, you know, struggle that you just deal with.
Mm-hmm. I have something to add, too. The thing about project management is it's also very measurable. I mean, you can state your budget on that project, like how much it costs you and how long it took you to to build. So in that kind of sense, you know, you really have clear backup of what your contribution is. So in that sense, I think that it really does. I mean, you kind of have like a little jacket or something, you know, like when someone says, oh, you didn't do that project that well, you can say, well, you know, we did it for 125 watt and it only took 3 weeks or something, you know, and you can't really argue with that, you know. So I mean, I think that if you're meeting like a certain amount of metrics, then I don't know if it's like an easy argument to like replace you.
See, I'm looking through. We've got lots of questions, which is great. Folks want to get your perspective on the solar industry in general. If anyone has any thoughts on where they see the expansion of residential solar, whether they see it expanding outside of California into the Midwest or the Southeast. Also thoughts on standardization of permits and requirements. Maybe that's a good question for Cari, since you're out in the Midwest.
The standardization of permits or the expansion of solar in the Midwest?
Either, whichever question you want to address, but they both have to do with the more general solar industry.
We're starting to see a lot more solar in the Midwest. It's kind of interesting when I do a lot of classes explaining to people how actually our cold weather is very conducive to solar. We produce more an hour with the same module when it's 32 below zero in January. We just don't have as many sunlight hours. And it's taking a while for people to figure that out. But we can actually compete fairly well because we can produce more an hour. So Minnesota, we're kind of, it goes and then it doesn't go. We've got Xcel Energy and the rebates happen, the grants happen, and then all of a sudden they run out of money and everything comes to a screeching halt. And then they come up with a new program, and right now they just are putting in a bunch more money, and so we're seeing a lot more solar happening right now in Minnesota. So it's kind of hit and miss. The biggest problem is we don't have the really high utility rates that you guys have in California. We're only paying 8 cents a kWh, so it's really, really tough for us to show payback. It's going to take getting those utility rates up closer to what they are in California before it's really going to take off anywhere without all the grants, rebates, and incentives. As far as the permits go, this has been a real hot topic just within the state of Minnesota because we've got a combination of city inspectors and state inspectors and things like that, and so there is no real standard. You can have the same 1 kW system, and it's going to cost you $50 to permit it in one location, and it's going to cost you $500 to permit it in the next location. They've proposed a bunch of options. One of them was a flat fee of a straight $125, no matter what the size of the system, as long as it was residential. Problem is, it's really hard to justify if I'm only putting a couple of panels on my garage roof versus I'm building a whole great big humongous structure across the backyard and I'm maxing out at my 40 kW cap. A lot of difference in how much you have to do for inspections on that. So it hasn't really gone anywhere. But the problem is you've got a lot of disparity in permitting across the country, no matter whether it's for solar, wind, or just standard construction. So if we can't standardize the cost for permits for standard construction, I really don't see us coming up with any standardization for solar. That's going to be a really tough one to do.
Mm-hmm. Another question for you, Cari, regarding your experience as an inspector. Someone wanted to know, how did you manage that transition from an electrician to an inspector? You could talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. That was interesting. Of course, in the state of Minnesota, you are required to be at least a journeyman electrician, if not a master, in order to be an inspector. It was very interesting at first because there really weren't a lot of women inspectors in Minnesota. We did have one gal at the State Board of Electricity who was very encouraging, but there was a lot of resistance the first couple of months, even years that I was inspecting. You'd get out on a job site and get an electrician who, there's no way in the world I'm going to take orders from a female inspector. And it took a lot of time for them to understand that they were going to get the same fees, the same violation notices as anybody else. And it didn't matter if they'd go and get one of the male inspectors, they still got the same red tags. So it was difficult. There was a real big learning curve there with the electricians in general. But as my dad told me when I first told him I was going to become an electrician, he said, you realize that being in a male-dominated field, you have to know twice as much. You have to do twice as much in order to be considered as half as good as the guys. So growing up with that, my attitude with my dad, and I do mean that in the best, kindest way, it was absolutely wonderful, but it prepared me for dealing with that out in the field with the contractors that I had to deal with. So if you do want to become an inspector, just expect that it's going to take a while. You're going to have to know your stuff, and there's going to be a learning curve in order to be accepted.
Mm-hmm. A couple more questions around female electricians. I think this one's for you, Bernadette. Do you know what percentage of your crews are women electricians?
You know, I don't know the percentage at all. Typically what we do is we contract with an EPC contractor, and they provide all the electricians, so I really can't tell you what the percentage is. It's not high, I can tell you that, but as I said before, I'm seeing inroads. I'm seeing more and more women in the field, maybe not working in an electrician role, but I mean, we have safety inspectors and trainers that are women. On my last project, she trained everyone on safety-related issues, and the project was in California, so we had all the requirements for critters and that we had to watch for, and so she did the training on that. I had a woman who worked on contract labor, and she managed our crews who did our module scanning. We had thousands and thousands of modules that needed to be scanned, and she managed that, and she and we're moving her from one project to the next. So I can't say the percentage, but I'm seeing more and more women out there.
Great. And if all of you could touch on kind of what do you see is the future of solar in the next decade, and that could be either for your career, your business, or the solar industry in general. Melissa, would you like to start us off on that discussion?
Yeah, I think that we'll continue to see reductions in pricing for modules and things, or something besides a module. I know there's a lot of companies working on paints and different types of surfacing type things that could be used instead of a module. So I think that there will be new products out there. I think that we'll continue to see residences see value in solar, and I think that as for me personally, I don't know if I haven't planned out a career. I kind of like to just do the things that I'm really interested in, so at this point, it's kind of taken me here. I'm sure it'll take me to a bunch of really great things, but I do see the industry continuing to grow, and I do think that all these companies that these women work for, will have a lot to offer and have a lot of positions for future women.
Cari, you want to share your thoughts on the future of solar?
Yeah, what we're seeing around here, because the upper Midwest is very into all of the energy codes, we're seeing buildings become a lot more energy efficient in general. And one of the options to get your LEED certification and meet all the energy requirements is to do solar. And so because of that, we are seeing a bigger push for the building integrated. Heard a lot of requests for windows that have the solar cells embedded in the windows to go into the building the way you would normally put windows anyway. I think we're going to see a lot more of that type of stuff coming out just because there is so much more demand for it. Like I said, we've got to wait until our rates get up higher before we're going to see a lot of it in the Minnesota upper Midwest area. But because of the energy codes, yeah, we will start seeing more of it. My own career, I'm just enjoying where things are at right now. I love the travel, getting to go out and see everything from the Appalachian Mountains to Bakersfield, California. We've been out to Lodi. We've been as far as New Jersey, Indiana. I worked with Amish crews on some solar fields out in Indiana. I'm just really enjoying this and hope it continues for the next 10 years.
Great. Me too. Bernadette, what are your hopes for the solar industry?
Well, what I've seen, I mean, I've mentioned before that my career has been exclusively in utility work. But as a company, I'm seeing more and more emphasis on distributed generation, DG type work, rooftop projects, smaller systems. That seems to be for us right now the growth area. I think as the prices of modules continue to fall and the efficiency continues to rise, I think utilities are going to get back into releasing more RFPs for larger utility scale projects. So I see that as a current trend, and I'm hoping for, you know, a renewed interest of utility companies getting back into it. The other thing that I've noticed, and I don't know the finance side of this very well, but institutional investors are buying projects, and they see these as, you know, long-term assets that are producing money, and they're good investments. So I'm seeing more and more of that, and they're getting more savvy. You know, I remember projects early on where, you know, you provided the testing that was required, but it was minimal. And as the same institutional investors come around for the second and third and fourth projects, their expectations are getting higher, and they're becoming more knowledgeable. And because of that, they're becoming more demanding. Which is, I think, good overall for the industry. For my personal career, actually, I am transitioning into another position. I've been promoted to a senior manager for operations, the Southwest region. So I'm excited about the promotion, but it's going to be a change for me. I'm used to managing projects, and now I'm going to be managing people who manage projects. So I think that's going to take some getting used to, personally, for me.
Congratulations on your promotion. That's great.
Thanks.
All right, so we did get the lovely life-work balance question. So how do you all find the home-work balance? Does your company support flexible work schedules? There was another question from someone that says, does your company, or do you know of other companies that have innovative policies that support women? Any of you want to take a stab at the...
I'll take that one. Yeah, the company that I currently work for, all it is 2 women. So very, very supportive. And because of the type of work we do, because we are all over the world, we bounce from California to New Jersey, back to Minnesota, to doing a system in Wisconsin. The hours are basically flexible. We'll be on the road for a week, and then I'm basically off for 2 weeks. And because my youngest child is a senior in high school, it works. If I had a couple of 2, 3, 4-year-olds, there's no way in the world. But the company I work for, because it is just the other gal and I, it is extremely flexible, very easy to work around family demands, personal time demands, and then we just make it work around the travel.
Mm-hmm. It's a great situation. Bernadette or Melissa?
Yeah. Well, SunEdison recently initiated flex time. And this is, you know, very recent. I mean, like last week. So I think you're going to see more and more people, you know, attempting that and seeing if that's going to work for their life to help balance out that work-life relationship that we have with ourselves. And recently, we also instituted a Women in Leadership program with SunEdison. I think SunEdison recognized that there weren't enough women in upper management positions overall in the company, and so they, you know, created committees to tackle this on all different fronts. You know, including work-life balance, becoming the best place to work. I think SunEdison is tackling this head-on right now, and I think, you know, with when we have the downturn in the economy, we're just barely hanging on. I mean, that's all we could do. And I think as the economy is improving, that opportunity for investing in your employees and keeping them happy is more and more important, because people have opportunities now that they didn't have. And so, you know, you need to hang on to the good talent. And I think SunEdison's making strong efforts toward that.
I would say that, you know, SolarCity is doing the same. I think because of computers and everything, you know, here everything is set up with go-to meetings and things. We have people all throughout the country. So it makes for a little bit more flexible schedule, in that, like, if most of your projects are on the East Coast, then you can kind of work during those time frames. If you're mostly working on California time, you can work during those time frames. We have a number of offices in the Bay Area that different people work out of. So, you know, there is the opportunity to, like, you know, jump into a meeting when you're in the car, or jump into the meeting if you need to work from home for some reason, attend an appointment or something. So I think that, with the rise of computers and being in the Bay Area where everything's kind of computer centric, I think that there's a lot more flexibility that goes along with that. And here at SolarCity we measure everything. So we know, how many projects people are doing, like what people's contributions are. So, if people are contributing positively, then it's not such a big deal that we see them from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. or the traditional work hours.
We're running up on the end of the hour here. One of the last questions I wanted to ask you all is, what is your favorite work tool? And it could be a field tool or something, software in the office, but something that you think is essential for your work.
I'll start with that one because when I saw that potential question, I had to bring out my pink hard hat. I love my pink hard hat, and I get more compliments on my pink hard hat. And when I'm out in the field, they know who I am. So I love my pink hard hat.
Great, yeah, safety first, definitely. Yes. Cari or Melissa?
My favorite tool, we got a Fluke IR thermoscan camera. And we use it a lot on job site because we can check for micro cracks on the modules, and we can check for loose lugs, hot lugs in the panels. Very, very useful tool. Of course, being an electrician, I love my meters. But we've also had a great time with it because it's also one of the tools that is used on the Ghost Hunters shows. And so we have occasionally had a chance when we've been staying at B&Bs or old supposedly haunted hotels to scan the corridors and our rooms looking for ghosts. Well, we do find something unusual.
That's fun. Melissa, do you have a favorite work tool?
I have to say, when I was managing projects in the field, my favorite tool was they sell these little magnetic levels. I'm sure most of the electricians use them. They're about 6 inches long, like this maybe, and you can stick them on stuff. They're magnetized, obviously. So they're just really cute. And I've given them as birthday presents to friends that I have that are guys. They all love them. They think they're very high class. But I just like their look, and they're actually really useful in the field because if you want to know something's level, why not just stick something to it?
Yep, exactly. All right. So how can folks, if we could just go around the table again, how folks can follow or connect with you, whether it's your webpage or LinkedIn? How can people find out what you're up to in the future? Bernadette.
Well, I am on LinkedIn, and I don't update it as often as I should, but I will try to make a point of updating it, so they can connect with me via LinkedIn. Great.
Cari.
Our contracting firm does have a website, and that's probably the easiest way to keep track of us. It's EcoVisionElectric.com, and there are links there for both my business partner, Kelly Benyo, and I on that one.
Great. Melissa.
I would say LinkedIn for me as well. That way, for me it's easier if everything's kept in one place. That way I can go there and, respond to any questions or requests or anything you guys might want to say. Then it doesn't get all lost in my own work email. So that would probably be the best.
Great. And unfortunately, we weren't able to get Koralie Hill on the line, but she is on LinkedIn as well. I'm on LinkedIn as well, and you can also follow our Women in Solar initiative at gridalternatives.org/women. Our next webinar is going to be in August, where we're going to be highlighting the careers of women in marketing and sales. You can also find out about our women's builds, networking events, find out how you can get some hands-on training and experience. So please check us out on our website. And if you are registered for this webinar, you will get a follow-up email with the link to the YouTube page, as well as to the link to our website. So again, thank you to all the panelists, to all the viewers, and of course, thank the sun. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.